Autonomy starts abstracting from like very low level and gives you a higher degree of interface, but the strategy is set by a human. There's even like a parallel of like level 2, level 3, level 4, where a lot of what AI does today is level 2. It makes life easier, faster, accelerates us, and becomes a multiplier. A lot of people no longer view the idea that in our companies, AI just flat out replaces people, but ends up being a gigantic multiplier where the one person can accelerate and do the work of 1.5 or 5 people. It doesn't mean you suddenly hire less people. It means your productivity skyrockets and your pace of development increases. At the end of the day, like AI is a optimization function that finds patterns and spits out things that logically make sense. Just those patterns can be increasingly complex and nuanced. The way we use it for good, for bad, effectively, ineffectively is kind of up to us.
Boris, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thank you. Real pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Last time we talked, I felt like we did the show, but we weren't recording. We got into so many cool topics. Like we should have just hit record on the last one, but here we are.
We started geeking out. It was a good time.
Here we are. So let's do it for real. Let's start from the top. Why don't you tell me about Bedrock Robotics?
So Bedrock, we are automating heavy machinery. So literally making fully operatorless machines in industries like construction. So we're starting with excavators, but these are the sort of machines that exist in pretty huge percentage of the kind of sectors that drive the productivity of the world, construction, agriculture, mining, lumber, garbage movement. And so we're enabling these machines to operate without any operators and start to do the work with far less constraints, increase safety, far more flexibility, and start to really reinvent the operations of these industries.
It's obvious the world's going in this direction. Why did you choose that? Is it an implement or machine? Why that machine first?
Yeah. So when you look at the different spaces, they all have different properties, different sizes. Construction's massive. It's like 13-14% of global GDP. And a decent slug of it is like this type of mass work that goes into, heavy civil work and digging foundations and pouring concrete and do all these sort of things. When you look at all construction machines, about a quarter of them are excavators. They're usually the highest utilized machines or near the top of the list. And they're definitely one of the hardest to learn, where it takes at least 4 or 5 years to become like truly competent as an excavator operator. This isn't like truck driving where, 3-4 months, you can kind of become pretty good. Excavators are like minimum 6 degrees of freedom, sometimes up to 9. And so the value that you can provide is massive, and the pull is massive because it's so hard to find people that are experienced in this space. And it therefore becomes a really great place to start. And there's a lot of evidence that, and examples in machine learning, we're starting with something more complicated and higher dimensional actually generalizes really well to easier and lower dimensional problems. And so it had this pull from every angle, and we felt like from a technical standpoint, we were ready to tackle it.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, I think, when I think about all the different things that we can automate, going to the real world, the physical world, is much different than when we're automating things in the digital world. And, you spent time at Waymo as well. What did you do at Waymo?
Yeah, Waymo was so fun. So my roots are in robotics and AI, autonomous driving. So I started this in this area in graduate school at Carnegie Mellon. This is a couple of decades ago, and that was fantastic because it was like the epicenter of a lot of this work that became Waymo and Uber ATG and Aurora and these other companies. Very fortunate to be there at the time. I ended up back reconnecting with this space at Waymo in 2019, and I was there for about 5 years. I was an executive there leading autonomous trucking, but also various technology teams where we were, I was leading perception, freeway driving, reliability, machine learning infrastructure at various points in time, and ended up supporting both platforms. And so had the chance to help launch the Jaguars into San Francisco, and then help scale that, and then launch freeway driverless towards the end of my time there.
And is that much different? I mean, thinking about the technology and what Waymo was doing, because a lot of that has to do with roads that don't change very often, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like that'd be very different than plane and dirt.
Right? So you're right. You're not physically changing and manipulating the world. Hopefully, in a good case, you're not. It was such an astronomically hard problem that I think everybody underestimated. So I still remember, hearing stories about how when Waymo started, the team and Sergey and Larry were thinking, all right, we're going to knock this out in like maybe 4 years, maybe 5. It's going to be awesome. It turned out to be a really, really hard problem. And the reason is because on public roads, you're dealing with such a complexity that even though you're not manipulating the world around you like Earth, there's so much complexity when it comes to the interactions with pedestrians and cyclists and cars. And that problem ends up being almost infinite, where when you think you're making really good progress and you have great driving and a good demo, you realize after a long time that you actually still have a huge amount of complexity in front of you, because the things that keep you from going driverless are happening not like in a 2-hour drive. They're happening every million miles or 10 million miles. And there's like huge amounts of permutations of those. And so it ended up being this like deceptively complex problem where you're always hostage to these like long tail safety cases that you're never fully in control of. But when you solve it, it's a pretty magical product where now you see Waymos in a decent number of early cities, announcing dozens more. And at least in San Francisco, it's well over a third of market share in robo-taxis and ride hailing. And it's just a superior experience. And so it's a pretty nice example of where you really focus on one of these industries, kind of vertically, really think about every element of it. The things you can do when you like control it, the whole experience in this way, you can make a superior product, then customers just love it. It's actually a pretty magical experience.
Yeah. What brought you from the Waymo experience to Bedrock? What was the connection?
I was a Waymo for a while, ended up being 5 years. And towards the end of it, I was really blown away by how powerful these new machine learning and data-driven approaches were. We made a very, very conscious jump to really embracing these sort of technologies, particularly on the behavioral side. When you think about how do you do path planning and interactions and understanding of what others are doing, it's obvious in hindsight, but back then it was a pretty big bet to go from the traditional robotics approaches of search, heuristics, and kind of engineered solutions to really embracing these machine learning and data-driven approaches. And it was astounding how, after we really went into it, how it not only helped solve the hardest problems of like driving in San Francisco, but it generalized. It jumped to Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin with less and less effort. We got it to jump from car to truck, where we architected to where data became the way you explain the differences, and 10 to 15% more data, we get most models to driverless quality. And so all of a sudden you have this superpower where you're able to absorb new capabilities, new environments, new platforms, and ones that are really different. Like a truck is 80,000 pounds fully loaded with an articulated trailer and horrendous vehicle dynamics driving on a freeway, while the Jaguars driving in San Francisco. And that actually helps you solve the truck problem. So it's kind of a very, very eye-opening. And so we started thinking like, okay, this is a whole new world. Like where can you apply these superpowers? And where we landed on was heavy machinery, where you have all these nuances of use cases, all these different platforms, and you can't sit there and engineer it like by hand and by structured solutions like you used to in other spaces. You had to use machine learning. And so it became this like really amazing opportunity all of a sudden that we're excited to pursue.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That the physical AI world and the digital AI world, why is robotics different?
It's incredible what, ChatGPT and Gemini and everybody, like these other companies, have solved. The difference is that you have this almost infinite corpus of data that is fairly broadly available where it can be purchased. And you have a common feature set, language, images, whatever the medium is, that is consistent. And then you can go and tune it for law or for entertainment, poetry, whatever you want. But like you have an incredible foundation that you can immediately train off of. There is no such thing in the physical world. There's no infinite corpus of data for all the different applications that you physically can do because these industries just don't exist like right now in digital form. And so you have a challenge of how do you get the data? And then even beyond the data, there's nuances to every single application where you use different machines. So one's a car, one's heavy machinery. Then there's humanoids that don't even exist. And so you try to get data for something that never existed, and then you got to build it. Then they all have distinct sensors and they all have distinct applications. And so you have like this infinitely complex space, which is genuinely more complicated than the digital domain, but you are trying to solve a problem that doesn't have the same foundation of data and features that we were used to in the digital world. And so that's why you see the sort of really unique levels of investment and the verticalized solutions like what Waymo did and what we're doing at Bedrock, where you really have to focus and think about it end to end. And so the idea of a generalizable brain as a horizontal for everything, we're probably short a transformational simulation breakthrough to even plausibly have that conversation. And that's maybe in 10 years or 15 years. But in the meantime, I think in the physical world, you really have to think about these as these verticalized solutions. That's not tiny. These like spaces are massive. It's still like 80% of world GDP is like the physical world. It's construction, it's mining, it's agriculture, it's transportation. So it's manufacturing. And so this will be the next wave, but I think they're going to be more verticalized solutions that try to navigate these problems. And it is trickier with a more surface area than the digital world, but that also creates a lot of value and more very defensible business.
What's your thoughts on, like, I believe it's called, is it edge robotics, edge AI within
edge AI?
Yeah.
Just in general, like kind of on the edge, I think it's massive, but it's going to take a lot of different forms. And so, like in general, when people think about like edge compute and edge AI, it's adding intelligence to everything, like in the physical world. So your parking meter being connected and aware of what's going on, your appliances at home, your vehicles, your heavy machinery, traffic lights. Like this is the way the future is going to look. It has to be the case. So being able to do analytics on, your home, your construction site, your infrastructure, being able to self-analyze, self-detect failures. There's a huge amount of value that can be created there. There'll be a big wave that is on the sensing side where understanding, cameras, microphones, some other type of state, temperature. Okay, that's valuable. You take a huge leap in what you can do when you actually are interacting with the world and you're manipulating it. And that's where the physical kind of like AI and kind of robotics comes in, because now you're actually able to like physically solve problems. And that's a whole new unlock, which is going to be a pretty big wave in the next 10, 15 years.
I think it's pretty far out, right?
Depends on which version, right? So Waymos are not far out. Like we're getting driverless cars and they're scaling. They're in hundreds of millions of miles at this point. And I believe there's probably in the order of 20 cities that have been announced they're going to get in the next year or two. So, okay, like within 5 years, like all major cities in the US are having autonomous cars on the road. That's pretty awesome. And then that jumps to, logistics and personal car ownership. Technically, heavy machinery 100% ready for it as well. It hadn't been focused on, and it needed this new wave of technology. But in a lot of ways, it's a way more practical path to market than the rigors and gauntlet that we went through at Waymo. I actually think manufacturing is going to be like a really huge one where you have onshoring and manufacturing. We're decoupling from China. The value is there. How do you do it? You're not going to do it by manual labor in the United States, so you have to automate more of it. Fulfillment, logistics. I think the humanoids for the home, that might be the sector that I personally don't buy as like in the really near future. It's consumers are so price sensitive. It's so astronomically complex and diverse on what sort of environments you'll have in the home, and how complex it is to deal with. They don't care about how hard your problem is. They don't care about why it's technically interesting what you solved. Like at the end of the day, like you want to charge them, 5 figures, like $10,000, $20,000. It better be pretty incredible when you're competing with a, few $100s of a, housekeeper and so forth. Right. And so I actually think that we're going to see this for the first time in these kind of large scale B2B applications, like the heavy machinery, like factories, like fulfillment centers. Even Waymo, the way it's doing it, it's not practical yet to put it in personal cars because there's too many constraints and it's, they're costing down the system. But
Right.
you fast forward and that's fine, but they're starting with this, kind of business approach of a robo-taxi, but you can now put onto a single car an astronomical amount of miles that suddenly pays off a pretty expensive self-driving system. And so it works. And so it's going to be a wave and an evolution, just like a lot of other technologies. But, what's the saying? It happens gradually and then all at once.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we're going to feel that in a few places like that.
I think the humanoids are an interesting one because I think there's going to be some fear of them. I think we've made too many movies where we fear that. I think some people are going to fear that. They're not going to fear your autonomous car or vehicle, but when something kind of is shaped like you doing things, I think there's going to be a fear factor.
Be careful of the uncanny valley as well. It's just okay, it's a little close, but not quite a human.
Right.
No, there's definitely a few too many sci-fi movies. It's hey, open the door. It's like, I'm sorry, Arthur, I can't do that.
I don't think it's good for you to go outside today. What?
Your credit card bounced this month. Slam.
Traditional software development, building software, you could build your roadmaps. You could, if you're a very good dialed in software SaaS company, you could really dial in your product roadmap and see it out quite a ways. And you could predict, time of what it's going to take to actually build things. Pretty good if you had a really good team, right? That's different when we're dealing with AI, I think, and the complexity of AI and models. How have you seen that transform in the time that you've been working? And how do you see, what is the right model, and how do you predict for time and manage a team to that?
You're right that AI is one of the places where it's very hard to anchor and really burn down in the way you would plan hardware, or the way you would plan a predictable kind of more traditional software project. But there's best practices and better understanding of how hard is it and how do you iterate on absorbing capabilities into a model and getting them better and better. At Waymo, it was interesting because it was so difficult in the early stages because you're going 0 to 1 with this astronomically high safety bar and there's no forgiveness. But in the later stages, basically the last 4 years or so, 5 years, Waymo was incredible at hitting its milestones, continuing to scale exponentially, pulling in milestones. And I think at that point, it figured out the formula of how do you solve safety at scale. And then it became a little bit more of a well-understood and predictable challenge of, okay, I need to pull in these new capabilities. We're going to add weather. We're going to add freeways. We're going to add these types of environments. We're going to add cold weather. We're going to add dust. We're going to add so on. Then we're going to add reliability so that we can be resilient to sensor failures and so forth. And that became a much more predictable phase because the idea of how do you manipulate these models and have it absorb more and more capabilities ended up being, there's an intuition that formed behind it, and there was a physics to it. The nice thing in some of the other spaces, like what we're doing in construction, where we're taking heavy machinery, we're going to make it autonomous, and it's going to unlock this astronomical amount of value in the space that is getting plagued by gigantic labor shortages and decays. They're going even further. There's huge pulls in the market for onshoring and manufacturing, AI ecosystems and so forth, safety and everything. We have the advantage in this space, and I think this is a property of a lot of spaces, where you do not have to solve 100% of every single thing a human might do with an excavator to provide something that is incredibly valuable in the market. We did have to do that with a robo-taxi in San Francisco, where until you really have solved San Francisco and everything it throws at you, you kind of don't really have a viable service that can take you anywhere you want that can be used in normal daily life. And so here in construction, we could go and create an incredibly capable machine that does earth moving and grading and mass excavation. And something like demolition and material handling follows soon after. But there's a ton of jobs, like gigantic amount of jobs that are doing mass excavation all the time, every single year at massive volumes. And so you can actually go to market a little bit more cleanly. And so that flexibility on the product side is one of the most valuable levers to absorb some of the uncertainties on the engineering side that are inevitable in any sort of application like this that manages large scale machine learning models.
That's interesting. Now, like from your vertical focus, it's like it's construction, it's data, and then match with like a partner ecosystem. Is that right? Is that how you look at it?
Yeah, and so what we are doing is we're taking existing heavy machinery. So these machines are millions of machines are, in the United States and across the world, um, and we are retrofitting them with a sensor compute suite, and actually turning an existing machine that could have easily cost 400, 500, $800,000 into one that's autonomy capable. Those machines can then be fully operatorless for the scope that's cleared for. That surface area increases with software updates, and they can still be manually operated. And these upfits take us about 2.5 hours at this point, and they're completely reversible. And so that's a really, really valuable property. So if you're a
Wow.
general contractor that owns 1,000 machines, like you don't need to go out and buy another $1 million machine or $500,000 machine. It's like, okay, this actually works. And so now these partners become our customers that are already buying and managing these machines, and they now unlock a huge volume of kind of superpowers that ends up allowing them to compress their schedules and work 10, 15, 24 hours a day. They have predictability. They don't have to worry about attrition. Safety is massively improved. You get visibility of the job, and you get to kind of eventually work towards an orchestrated layer that like manages a fleet of machines. They end up operating these site machines and sites exactly as they have been, but this technology basically creates a digital operator that is our core business that ends up having complete flexibility and is able to help meet some of the really painful shortages that they're currently suffering.
What is there's a bigger vision behind this digital operator, it sounds like, right? What is that?
Very much. So the hardware is just a means to an end. It's like, okay, you need the sensors and the compute that turns it into an autonomous machine. The product is the operator. So we are the digital Bedrock operator. It's a digital operator that ends up operating the machine. And what's interesting is that what starts as a unit, like you're delivering an excavator that plugs into today's workflow, but can do these scopes of work in a really exceptional fashion. That evolves down the road as you start to snowball, the same way Waymo felt to snowball across cities and platforms. As this goes and jumps to demolition material handling, fine grading, other types of work in an excavator, and then jumps to other machines like wheel loaders, motor graders, bulldozers, compactors, scrapers. You now are completing sets of machines that are necessary to do a job. And as you think of scopes of work, like the work on a heavy civil project to kind of build a road, you can now start to think of this as working over some years into an operating system that is orchestrating all the machines and coordinating them, estimating the time of the job, giving you the variance, giving you updates in real time. And as a general contractor, you're not micromanaging your wheel loaders or your bulldozers anymore. You are interfacing with this OS. You're defining the goal of what you want to build, not how does the excavator need to behave day to day in order to do it.
Right.
And it completely changes the entire operations. And it even goes further than that. You could be a general contractor with 15 jobs in a metropolitan area, and these systems are optimizing across the union of all of them and telling you that, hey, Friday morning, you should move your wheel loader from site 7 to site 4 because it's going to start to get highly utilized, and that's going to optimize your whole system. So you can totally see how this is expansionary. Like this isn't like there's a fixed amount of work and we're going to swap how we do it. This is a world where we have astronomically more work to be done than the ability to meet it. The prices are skyrocketing, work's not getting done. And if you start to unlock both the building blocks of an autonomous machine and the operating system of this orchestration layer that manages it and that general contractors and subcontractors can interface with, the work skyrockets. It gets done cheaper, faster, more reliably, more predictably. Work gets planned more sequentially because the variances are lower. The developer for new housing communities that has to take out a loan and pay 9% interest, suddenly the projects pencil out because you can compress it by 2 months and your IRR completely changes, and suddenly a huge plethora of other projects appears. And that creates jobs for electricians and piping and all the woodwork and
Right.
the cement work and everything else. And so you can totally imagine how this starts to not just unblock the direct pain points that we have, but actually starts to become truly expansionary in a world where we have shortages on almost every sector of the construction space.
The efficiencies are amazing and just really unlocks a lot of different
Totally.
aspects of
Yeah.
of the market, which is really fascinating. I'd love to switch gears to I feel like I've been helping teams operate for 30 years and just studied how teams operate and create efficiencies and that. How do you feel like business has changed for you and how you operate Bedrock? Has it changed much, like the way that the teams are structured and you creating alignment and focus, and how does that look?
So it's interesting. It's a really great question. These are really novel types of development. So you want to go and you want to build like a traditional consumer electronic or an operating system. Like there's a very, very well understood framework or website, right? Okay, there's front end, there's back end, there's interface, there's this, there's that. Here are the APIs, and you can kind of like modularize it, just go off and run. And it's like there's a well understood science to it. And this sort of a world, everything's interconnected. You're defining the system architecture of the hardware with the complexities of the software in mind. You're defining the operating system to handle all of this flow. You got to think of the simulator as something that takes into account the product space. When you're doing machine learning for this problem, the infrastructure and the layer that enables it has to be built in union. And there's a really aggressive feedback loop with the product side. So there's all of these things that are incredibly interconnected and malleable. And so what we find is that our teams have to blur a lot more, where every single team speaks the language of many other teams, because you can never isolate these problems with a clear definition the way you would expect. And they're all iterative because a lot of these things are never done. There's always the next wave of problems that you have to solve. Mm-hmm. That biases us to be in office more as by far the dominant kind of thread, where that collaboration becomes important. We're solving problems. I forgot to mention operations. So you're like in the field, you're remote, you have connectivity limits. There's all these things you have to kind of navigate. But at the end of the day, one of the most important things that becomes different is that you go from a world where solving problems is software engineers that are layering in logic and engineered solutions to solve that problem, which is the case for a vast majority of engineering. And when you want to scale, you add more software engineers. And you're shifting into a world where data is your means to solving these problems. The engineers are architecting the system, and there's a lot of elements around it. But at the core of it is these behavior models that are not defined by software and logic. They're defined by the data that you feed them and the way you architect the networks and the cost functions. And a lot of the engineering work moves towards evaluation and understanding what you're trying to solve, how you think about curating the data set, how you think about hill climbing on the gaps that are there, and how do you actually tie that into the final product that you're trying to solve. And so it changes the teams entirely. Like we used to have even compared to Waymo, where there was a traditional, perception team, behavior team, behavior prediction planning. Like here, we're thinking about the whole autonomy stack as one large end-to-end model. And until that breaks, we want to maintain that sort of purism, which we're able to do in a way that was actually pretty challenging in full public road autonomy. But there's things that are adaptive. And so you kind of run into a situation where you completely change the tools that you have to work with to solve problems. Mm-hmm. And that changes the organizations. It changes the sprint cycles that you're on. Right. And it turns it into a data engineering and infrastructure problem to help you find and identify and accelerate this feedback loop, which puts infrastructure and autonomy in this like really close marriage that is far, far deeper than what you would typically see in a lot of other applications.
I noticed this coming straight out of college. I had started a business in college and sold it. It was the tech.com boom at the time. And the first, I played a variety of roles in venture-backed companies. The first one I was in, immediately I realized everything I learned at school didn't apply anymore. Like you don't write a business plan and then you go execute it. Like you need this living operating system, and teams that are doing things that have never been done before, which is basically my last 30 years of working with those teams, are highly cross-functional. And like you said, everybody needs to know more about what everybody else is doing and how they're doing it. And, some of the tools that we use, I think that work well if you know how to use them correctly, are like OKRs and planning, like understanding where you're going, what you need to do, how to do it, and like intermeshing that all together as a full team. And I find teams that are not good at doing new things or being at the edge, leading edge, they're much more siloed companies, and they can be because they just know what to do every day and nothing's changing. But in companies, like Bedrock and people that are really at the forefront, these teams have to be really interlocked.
Totally.
You have to have very crystal clear objectives and know where you're going and who's doing what and when it's going to get done by. And it's this highly iterative process.
Yeah.
You know,
And how you measure it, how you like actually iterate on it. And so
measuring is even an iteration too, right? Like you
huge,
select
like,
things to measure and then you learn, oh, these are the right things. These weren't the right things. And we probably need to measure it at this cadence or that, right?
What do you hill climb on? What happens when the metrics are contradictory? And so, yeah, metrics and like kind of evaluation is a really interesting one because in any ML driven product, the metrics that you're optimizing for end up being like so core to anything that you end up doing. Kind of by definition, you're measuring something that's a product focus, not a technology focus.
Yeah.
And when you have a metric that needs to improve or that you're currently focusing on, almost by definition, it's not tied squarely to a particular team. It's a horizontal. So for example, let's say we're optimizing productivity and like the pace of Earth movement in a project. That is a function of everything. It's like hardware. It's a safety system that might be constraining the system. It's autonomy. Right. It's their pose. It's like it ties the entirety of your problem together. You can almost never escape this sort of property that in this world of like ML and AI, the challenges end up being very horizontal ones, and you need people who are very comfortable speaking the language of the full product and understanding the business needs and understanding the full tech stack. Whereas in traditional engineering, I think you actually could more often get away with silos where, okay, somebody's an expert at file systems or they're an expert at this detector. And, you know, and they understand the inputs, they understand the outputs. They don't have to worry about where they go. And you can kind of like isolate and identify these sort of problems, front end, back end, you know, whatever it might be. Here, you can't do that. Like everything's a giant blur and you have to be comfortable speaking the language of the whole system and product.
Right. And for people that are not as technical, another way to look at this is, like, who owns revenue in a company? You know, I've had this conversation a million times.
Yeah.
Well, like revenue comes from sales, but if we don't have the right product, we can't sell it. If we're not marketing it correctly, we're not going to get salespeople leads. And then if they buy it, but they're not staying on it, customer success is involved. So who really owns revenue? I think this is happening at much more micro levels within the organization now, based on the speed in which that we're moving. And at the end of the day, you can double tap and triple tap into those things to see where this all lives. But in essence, it all lives together. And that's why I think it's so important that teams are aligned, is because if you can't create the alignment around what's important and then break it down to who owns what, it's really hard to live at the front of this change and evolution.
That's right. And you almost never, it's totally different. And you also never quite finish a product in this world of like ML driven products. There's always iterations and improvements where if you buy a car, the car is what it is. And in 7 years, you'll buy another car, or you buy a dishwasher and it's a dishwasher. And I don't know, if you're lucky, maybe it gets a firmware update at some point, like if it's online, but like, that's kind of it. You go into these products and these new generations of technologies that are software defined and ML defined. By the very nature of ML, there's always room to absorb new capabilities and improve.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is, you know, if you think of like a vehicle that you operate, right? And then there's people that operate businesses, right? Yep. We've seen that there's a variety of levels of autonomy we can do with our cars now, right?
Yep.
And I think we're doing the same internally within our businesses, and something that I'm working on, you know, with organizations and creating an operating system to take the business from vision to execution, right? I think it's really interesting. I feel like it's obvious that there's a variety of layers and that we're doing with creating autonomy within businesses as well. And we can kind of see that is going to probably go all the way through, but I still kind of come back to this one thing where I believe that humans will always want to make decisions. And the same as a car that we can have now fully be autonomous for us, we still, as humans, decide where we want to end up, the destination, right? I don't know if I foresee a world where, you know, we have the autonomous business where we're not still choosing where we want the business to go or land.
autonomy starts abstracting from like very low level and gives you a higher degree of interface, but the strategy is set by humans. So where do you want to be taken in a car? How, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? How do you want to write this letter? The true strategy gets more and more challenging to attain. There's even like a parallel of like level 2, level 3, level 4, where a lot of what AI does today is level 2. It basically is an assist that makes life easier, faster, accelerates us, and becomes a multiplier. There's a lot of people I'm hearing think about this no longer view the idea that in our companies AI just flat out replaces people, but ends up being a gigantic multiplier where the one person can accelerate and do the work of 1.5 or 4 or 5 people. And just like in a lot of economic areas, it doesn't mean you suddenly hire less people. It means your productivity skyrockets and your pace of development increases, which is pretty cool. At the end of the day, like AI is a optimization function that finds patterns and spits out things that logically make sense. Just those patterns can be increasingly complex and nuanced. The way we use it for good, for bad, effectively, ineffectively is kind of up to us. And so what's interesting about this is that I think that the most high level, most strategic roles, like an architect of a piece of software, somebody setting the story for a movie, somebody who's in the end, like leading an organization, I can't see that being replaced because that's the compass of like what's happening. The vulnerable positions might be the ones that are like the very, very entry level, programmer, copywriter,
right.
Artist in a marketing studio. It's easy to see the impacts locally, but just like any technology revolution, what's not obvious is what are the sort of jobs that get created and roles that get created where, okay, instead of the direct copywriter, you're now the, people will start to get trained to most effectively prompt engineer and optimize the output of a system and how do you manipulate it in order to get the best output out of it. And there's a lot of shifts, but I think I'm with you. I think there's a lot of acceleration that'll happen. I'm more optimistic than maybe some people I've heard about the degree of sheer disruption that happens, because at the end of the day, every single tool we've ever created in history, no matter how powerful, locally is disruptive in the way the workflow happens. But we're always horrible at predicting the vast amounts of opportunity that get created, both because of the use of those tools and in the actual, because of what the tools enable, and in the actual manipulation and usage of those tools. And so
I agree.
It's that'll be fun to see it play out, but I don't think it's quite one-sided like people make it out to be.
The interesting thing on the lower level jobs, and I think a lot of people say this, and we've talked about this a lot on the show. What I think is interesting, what we're not thinking about, is how AI can provide training to those people and simulations to those lower level people. And I think the role of an apprentice may come back actually even stronger. People that are like maybe being trained on these situations and simulations, but also shadowing more experienced people and learning from them and supporting them, because we're going to have to bridge that gap. But I don't think a lot of people are thinking about leveraging those technologies to bridge the gap as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fascinating. And it's hard to predict where technology will go in the future and where the industry goes, because we can't outthink that. And there's always been opportunity that's created from this. And I think it's really fascinating where that might go. And it's hard to predict.
Right.
You can't.
But I'll give you like examples where like it'll be they'll create industries as well. So, take entertainment. Before, it was a very narrow set of people that could make a movie or compose music or bring a story to life. And all of a sudden, it's not impossible to see how these tools can enable shockingly inexpensive storytelling in movie form that teenager in Africa can go and like kind of leverage and put together, or in Iowa or wherever, without the need for camera team and CG team and this and this and that.
Right.
And suddenly you take something that used to require like a 100-person team, you can have an individual put together and actually create a beautiful work of art. And so we've seen kind of the democratization of content creation, just even with social media and mobile. This is kind of the next wave. And I think the ability to make an app, the ability to make creative art forms, the ability to communicate across language barriers, like all of these things are actually pretty big unlocks that on their own are actually massively expansionary in terms of the opportunities that are out there. And I think we're really not great at itemizing all the examples of how this can actually be a pretty massive unlock for just production in society.
Yeah, well said. Well said. That's so true. All right, I have one last question for you. This has been an awesome conversation. I could talk to you all afternoon. Unfortunately, I don't have the time, but I could. So the last one is more of a scenario. I love asking this question. And I did not prepare you at all for this question, so this will be fun. The scenario is you're on a desert island the rest of your life. You have food, you have water, you have everything that you possibly could have. However, there's one thing that's missing, and that's entertainment. There's no entertainment on this island, and you're trapped on the rest of your life. But luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. Boris, what album are you going to bring?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is a fun one. This is good. Definitely going back to 90s rock. This is going to be my core. And I'm thinking like, gosh, there's Nirvana's got some good ones. Probably maybe Nirvana, Chili Peppers, like one of
oh wow.
Like there's some good ones there.
You and I must be the same age.
Yeah, no, it's just like, but this is, right I mean, this was like kind of, like high school and everything, like in the late 90s. But I just think I love like some of those like kind of classics that were already mature at that point. But yeah, like Nirvana or Chili Peppers, some of their like kind of like just peak music was just awesome.
Like Chili Peppers, maybe like Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Yeah, totally.
Would be a good one, like right in that. Yeah, Smells Like Teen Spirit for Nirvana. Yeah.
All
right.
It's fun. Oh man, that's that'll make the desert island a little bit more tolerable, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the show. It was great having you.
Yeah, amazing. Really great to catch up. Thank you for having me.